If you've been following Atari's return to prominence, then you may have noticed that it's come in phases. The first phase involved recharging a bunch of classic arcade games like Centipede, Missile Command, and Breakout. These were simple games that played into their arcade roots while still giving us a more modern video game experience. Now comes Phase 2, where different developers are given a chance to flesh out the stories and the lore of some of Atari's most memorable games. This started last year with Orbit Studios developing a new haunted house game, and just recently it was revealed that Way Forward would be tackling a new Yars sequel. In between those two is Lunar Lander Beyond, the sophomore release from Dreams Incorporated. With a massive story, cool cast of characters, and a wide variety of stages, is this long overdue sequel worth the 45-year wait? That's what we're about to find out when I review Lunar Lander Beyond. Before we go beyond, let's first talk about Lunar Lander, the 1979 arcade game from Atari. Released in the wake of NASA's various moon missions, this is a game where you use your thrusters and smooth piloting skills to land your lunar landing module across increasingly hostile terrain. While it was moderately popular at the time, the game would quickly be usurped by a more action-packed Atari game called Asteroids. While certainly not the most successful arcade game of its time, Lunar Lander ended up being extremely influential, inspiring a whole genre of games where you have to overcome gravity and other obstacles while parking your spaceship. Now, 45 years later, Lunar Lander Beyond takes that basic concept and fleshes it out into a real, fully realized video game, complete with characters they actually care about and a compelling story that's about a lot more than just landing. It takes place about 150 years into the future, when space exploration is a thing and we've colonized planets like Mars and Venus. You're a new hire at Pegasus, a corporation that delivers cargo, retrieves resources, and taxis people around to different moons and planets. Your life is forever changed when a series of devastating black holes mysteriously appear throughout the galaxy, wreaking havoc and mass destruction on the normally peaceful planets. In the blink of an eye, Pegasus goes from a simple courier company to a vital part of the rescue effort. Your job quickly becomes all about flying through harrowing stages in an effort to save the people stranded on a series of different planets, all while learning more about this catastrophic event. Lunar Lander Beyond is being sold as a story-driven follow-up to the classic arcade game, and for good reason. So much of this game revolves around rescuing the right people and watching as they work to not just figure out what's going on, but also to find a solution. We have a fun cast of characters here, including a drugged-out doctor, a former ace pilot, and even a Russian woman who has a general hatred and distrust of all things Pegasus. What I like about this game is how it allows the different characters to speak their mind and bring up some important questions, which at times can make it even harder to know who's right and who's wrong. There's some fun twists and turns to the story, and the voice cast does a good job at keeping things interesting. This helps when it comes to the levels, which largely center around simple rescue missions. Yeah, it's probably too much to call Lunar Lander Beyond the futuristic sequel to Choplifter. But I'm telling you, at times, it certainly feels like that. A lot of this game involves navigating through mazes and hostile areas in hopes of landing at the different bases to safely rescue the people that are stranded after the event. Even when a mission isn't specifically geared towards rescuing civilians, you'll often have an optional quest where you can go and save a pilot, which can later be used to run future missions. Early on, the game is mostly about getting used to the lander's unique controls, which means flying through a bunch of hoops and collecting space credits. Other missions will have you land in strategic locations in order to gather up information or maybe solve a problem. In yet another type of stage, you'll have to protect the base from falling meteorites, which means snagging a shield icon and then ramming them with your ship. Things definitely heat up as you near the last act of the game, but most of the missions will involve searching for items and then performing a successful landing. Now, when it comes to the original Lunar Lander and games like it, a lot of people can be put off by the gameplay. This is a genre that is, by design, fighting against you every step of the way, making what should be simple maneuvers a lot more complicated than they should be. The good news is that Lunar Lander Beyond has the solution to this problem. While the game starts you out with the kind of thruster-based ship that you saw in the original, you'll actually unlock several more ships throughout the course of the game, including one called the Dragonfly, which completely changes the way the game plays. What sets this ship apart from the rest is you don't press a button to control the thruster. The idea is to hold the direction you want to move and then watch the ship go, which is definitely a lot easier than the other ships, but still requires a bit of a learning curve in order to navigate the narrow passageways of Venus. The important thing is the Dragonfly gives this game some much needed variety, allowing you to ultimately choose the kind of experience that you want to have. This story tries to suggest that you'll want to switch between the different ships depending on the mission, but in reality you'll be able to complete pretty much every mission with any lander just as long as you have the skills. It helps that you can find and equip 3 different special abilities to each of the ships. One of the first that you'll receive is a stabilizer, which will definitely come in clutch when your lander starts to go too fast or becomes a little bit hard to control. Other attachments include a tractor beam, a dash move, a temporary shield, and even a move where you can swap out a little bit of health for some extra fuel. These useful abilities are hidden in the different stages, which will teach you to thoroughly explore each level before landing. Best of all, you can swap between these upgrades between missions, and they're always mapped to the same 3 buttons. Now, there are some interesting ideas at play here, though not all of them are as fully conceived as the rest of the game. A good example of this is the pilot's sanity, which is something you'll need to keep track of alongside the ship's fuel and structural integrity. When you crash into things, it'll begin to spook the pilots, which can ultimately lead to a type of space madness where you start to see horrific images like eyes and mouths and elephants? The way to solve this problem is to send them to the doctor, where the pilot will be out of commission for a few missions. This means that you're going to need to choose a different, often less experienced pilot to fill in for a while. That's a cool concept, but it never really hinders you as much as it probably should. Another problem involves the space credits that you collect along the way. Outside of a couple very specific medical procedures, there's basically nothing to spend your money on. All the ships and the abilities are unlocked just by playing the game. And there's absolutely nothing to upgrade on your lander. I ended up finishing the game with nearly 3 million credits, none of which I ever needed to spend. That's a shame because so much of the exploration is focused around finding these space credits. I don't care if it's just a paint job or maybe adding silly effects to your trail. I just needed something, anything to spend my money on. Visually, the game looks good and I like the techno-filled soundtrack. The levels are all incredibly bite-sized, with none of them taking more than 5 or 6 minutes to complete, and most barely even taking that long. The challenge certainly ramps up quite a bit in the later stages, but it never feels cheap, and there are always plenty of checkpoints in the longer levels. As said, some of the missions are a bit repetitive, and the game probably could use 2 or 3 more objectives, just something to shake things up a bit. Look, the Beyond in the name is no joke, because this game goes about as far beyond the original as you can possibly go without losing sight of what made that game so memorable. Between the genuinely compelling story, the likable characters, and the lengthy campaign full of missions to complete, I can't imagine any Lunar Lander fan being disappointed by this overly ambitious sequel. Even those who might normally shy away from this genre will find a lot to like in Lunar Lander Beyond. I like this direction for Atari, and I hope to see more of these story-driven sequels and reboots in the future. Lunar Lander Beyond is everything fans could possibly want, and a whole lot more. Unshackled by the Recharged series, this update turns the simple concept found in the 1979 arcade game into a story-driven adventure where the fate of the entire galaxy could depend on how well you park a spaceship. Featuring dozens of exciting missions and a cool cast of characters, this really does expand on the original concept, turning it into something almost unrecognizable. I wish some of the original ideas were fleshed out more and the game could stand to use a few more mission types. But even people who normally shy away from the Lander genre will be won over by its charm. This is one small step for Atari, one giant leap for Lunar Lander. Hey, thanks for watching our review. If you liked what you saw here, then you should know that we post new reviews and features almost every day. Now, here's the question I have for you. What classic Atari game needs an epic story? Given what they've just done with Lunar Lander, I'm actually really excited to see where they go after Yars. Atari's been on a real roll lately. Let me see your picks in the comments below. In other news, we'll be back later this week with a review of Wrath, Ion of Ruin. We're also going to have a fun Alien Day special. While you wait for that, I strongly recommend you click that subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then.